Hello, guys and gals, and welcome to another episode of maggot-infested unique items. Yes, this is the Spire of Lazarus. And the Spire of Lazarus, as you can clearly see, is made out of maggots. I hope I've ruined all you guys' hopes and dreams for this item. The Spire of Lazarus is a relatively low-level staff, and it's actually a pretty good low-level staff, to be honest. There are a couple other choices that you could possibly choose, like the Iron Jangbong, which we just covered in the previous episode. But the Spire of Lazarus is more specifically pointed at a Lightning Sorceress, whereas the Iron Jangbong kind of has like a smattering of skills in multiple different trees. Now, this particular staff is only 4 to 12 damage, so it's not really a physical damage weapon, and you're probably not going to be using it to bonk things, although you could. It's only level 18, which postures it basically Act 2 normal difficulty, which is around the same time that you get the other maggot-infested staff, which comes from the maggot layer, known as the Ancient Heraldric Staff. And it does have the same appearance as well, by the way. It does have +1 to Sorceress skills on it, which is pretty amazing, and for a low-level character, plus the skills is great. A lot of your skills at low level can actually be useful, like, no matter what, and so having something like the Spire of Lazarus with +1 to skills can certainly be really useful early on in the game. We have 1 to 28 lightning damage, which, believe it or not, in normal difficulty, if you were to go to, like, for instance, like Maggot, you know, like, let's say Canyon of the Magi, 1 to 28 lightning damage is actually enough to bonk some things. Like, you could actually go out here, maybe with enchant on, and you could do a little bonkening, and you can kill some stuff with this staff. It's really just because of that additional lightning damage and the fact that it's level 18. So, you know, at this particular level, the lightning damage actually is useful. But of course, as you level up and you get higher into the game, it's not going to be very useful anymore. A lot of the elemental damage on weapons and stuff like that seems to be like almost specifically calculated for like the area that you find it, and then like after that it's just not really worth it anymore. Another thing to take into account is that if you actually were a Lightning Sorceress and when you were using this outside of level 30, you could actually put points into Lightning Mastery and actually increase that lightning damage even further. So Lightning Mastery will increase the on-hit damage of the lightning, and you could add in enchant and other things like that if you just wanted to like be a bonking sorceress. We also have +1 to Chain Lightning, which means we have a total of +2 to Chain Lightning, which is pretty darn sexy. And Chain Lightning is very good for killing large swaths of monsters due to the fact that it hits multiple targets. And then we also have +2 to Lightning, which is our direct damage skill. It does have a pierce to it, so it will hit targets behind it, but it's nowhere near as damaging as Chain Lightning can be because of how it bounces from target to target. Each one has its own specific benefit. I'm not going to talk about like the skills right here. I actually have videos on those skills if you want to check them out. But suffice it to say, Chain Lightning is for the big, giant, spread-out groups, and Lightning is for the smaller, tighter groups and the single-target monsters. You don't use Chain Lightning on single-target monsters, you use Lightning. You don't use Lightning on big, giant, spread-out groups, you use Chain Lightning. They just work better in those regards. And then we also have +3 to Static Field, which makes a pretty massive amount of Static Field of +4. And Static Field is absolutely amazing, even at early levels, and especially in normal difficulty where there is no penalty. If you guys are unaware of this, Static Field does have a penalty, and it does not go down below 50% in Nightmare difficulty, and it doesn't go about down, 33% in Nightmare and 50% in Hell, in the amount of HP that it will reduce. So if you use this in normal difficulty, you can actually reduce the HP of a monster all the way to basically 1% just by using static, which is pretty darn cool. So like, for instance, if I were to go into the Frigid Highlands and utilize Static Field in normal difficulty, which is obviously at level 18, that's exactly where this staff is postured. So, you know, if I'm down here using my Static Field on a target, you'll notice that I can Static Field the monster's HP down literally to 1, and the monsters will literally be at 1 HP. And Static Field is absolutely broken OP in normal difficulty, in my opinion, for this very reason, because not only can you use that on regular monsters, elites, champions, you can also use it on bosses, and you can literally just static down everything. Now, what's the benefit of having a higher level of static, so having more points into static? The answer is the radius. So static, you don't necessarily need more than 1 point on any character. I would recommend that every single sorceress have static. It's kind of a no-brainer. If you ever play a sorceress and you don't have the static skill, you might want to at least put 1 point into it. But increasing the level increases the radius, which means you can hit more and more targets. Maxing out static, for instance, like say if you were a Nova Sorceress, who's going to do that anyway, gets you a radius of 24.6 yards, which is absolutely insane. And if we were to go somewhere like, let's say the Darkwood, the monsters are always nice and spread out in the Darkwood. If you were to go somewhere like Darkwood and actually utilize this ability, you'll notice that literally like everything on the screen is getting hit like at the same time. And it can just be a massive way that you can just chunk down monsters' HP. So having something like this with +4 to static field can certainly be extremely useful to a low-level sorceress because it's going to give you the extra range to hit multiple targets. And on top of that, I mean, it's just a free static field. So early on in the game, you wouldn't even have to put 1 point into static field. You could just simply rely on Spire of Lazarus for a little while until you get to a higher level, so you could put those points that you would have put into static field into something else. And then, of course, like I said, later on when you're a higher level, throw 1 point into static field when you take Spire of Lazarus off, because it's definitely a good one to have. Now, we also have +15 energy, which is a pretty nice bump to our mana. As you can see, we go from 515 mana to 545. And that actually does help our regeneration. The more mana that we have, the more we can regenerate. And that will, of course, stack with all the other regeneration effects we have, like warmth, and also the regeneration that's on the staff of 43%. So not only does this give us more energy, which will help us regenerate faster, it also gives us more regeneration, which of course will also help us regenerate faster. And all of these combined together will have a pretty healthy effect on our mana pool just in general. I mean, without the staff, we're probably going to regenerate a hell of a lot slower. And on top of that, we also have a massive, I mean, just absolutely massive 75% to all resistances. Sorry, 75% to lightning resistance. Why did I say all resistances? I guess I'm just so used to saying all resistances. But lightning resistance is absolutely amazing for Act 2, which is exactly where you would put this staff on. And why is that? Because beetles. That's why. Beetles everywhere. Act 2 is absolutely full of lightning beetles, and putting this staff on will essentially make you immune to those lightning beetles, so you don't have to worry about the stupid lightning and damage that comes from those beetles at this particular time period. In Act 3, when you get there, you can also utilize this to help protect you from the gloams which appear in the Great Marsh. There is a pretty healthy amount of gloams in the Great Marsh, and having 75% lightning resistance here will also come in handy. And then on top of that, when you get to Act 4 difficulty and you're hunting for Iswal in the Plains of Despair, again, there are more gloams in the Plains of Despair. So it will help protect you from the gloams in the Plains of Despair also. And then on top of the Plains of Despair, we also have the gloams that appear inside of Worldstone Keep. So you literally have, a very nice item that can help protect you from the majority of the lightning damage in the game. And even when you get to Nightmare difficulty, that 75% lightning resistance will help beef you up high enough so that the lightning damage isn't hurting you there. Now, granted, by the time you get to Nightmare difficulty, you may have a better weapon, shield combination going on. And by that time, if you do, well then great. But if you don't, you can still utilize this staff into Nightmare difficulty for a while until you find something better. We also have 5 damage reduced by, which is physical damage, and could come in handy if you're utilizing Energy Shield. It also is pretty nice just to help reduce a little bit of the damage from you when you do get stuck into those those silly situations. Now, unfortunately, this staff does not have faster cast. And at a really low level, like level 18, I mean, it's not that big of a deal. But as you get further in the game, the lack of faster cast on this item is going to become more and more apparent. Obviously, you're going to be taking off things like the stealth armor for something else that has defense and resistances. You may or may not have found faster cast rings at that point. And, it's going to be a pain in the butt if you don't find some kind of faster cast equipment. And the staff is obviously eating up the weapon and the shield slot that you could, of course, be using for faster cast, which is an issue. This staff also comes in the ethereal form, of course, at 6 to 18 damage and only it's still no requirements. Now, there's really no difference. You're not really going to be bonking things with this staff anyway, so if you do find the ethereal version, it's not really that big of a deal. And you could use it anyway, just for the style points. It does look pretty cool to have the ethereal version of this staff, because it has a very nice ethereal nature. In fact, some people actually specifically hunt down the ethereal versions of items like this, just so they can have the pretty appearance. Now, as a level 18 staff, we would definitely want to find this in Act 2. So let's take a look and see over on Silo's Pen where potentially we would find this if we wanted to get our hands on it, and see if we can actually find it at the level that we need it. Because it's not going to do us any good if we find it like by the time we're in like Act 5 with Bale and we've already got better items equipped. We need to find this, like in Act 2 or maybe Act 3 at the very latest. Otherwise, it's not really going to do us very much good. So let's see here. Does it start with a the? No, it's just Spire of Lazarus. It's not the Spire of Lazarus. All right, so assuming about 50% magic find, Diablo, Bale, Iswal, Mephisto. So Mephisto can drop it at 1 in 859. Nothing, unfortunately, in Act 2 or beginning of Act 3. I mean, Mephisto is really like the end of Act 3. And honestly, by the time you get to Mephisto, you're already, moving on to Act 4. So it's not really that helpful. Let's check the super uniques. A bunch of monsters in Act 5. We got Stormtree in Act 3 and Lower Kurast at 1 in 8,211. And Battlemaid Serena, same. Both of these guys are Act 3, and they're relatively easy to get to and farm. A lot of really poor options for a level 18 character who wants to get their hands on this. I mean, it does seem to have a possibility of dropping from the council, but it's 1 in 37,134, which is pretty awful. I'm sure that if we bumped our magic find up to about 100%, that percentage would probably go up, or sorry, down. Not really all that much. 1 in 30,000 now instead of 1 in 34,000. Honestly, it looks like Stormtree and Battlemaid Serena are the best options for a low-level character trying to get their hands on this, which is rather unfortunate because at level 18 in Act 2, this is actually a pretty nice staff. I think just about any sorceress, if they actually had their hands on this in Act 2 difficulty, Act 2 difficulty, Act 2 normal difficulty, it would definitely be a nice little staff to hang on to for a little while until they manage to get some better pieces of equipment. It's not specifically for everybody, though. I don't think an ice sorceress might use this over something else, or a fire sorceress might use this over something else. But a lightning sorceress is definitely going to get the most benefit out of this. You could, however, use this on a non-lightning sorceress just to get the free level 4 static field, which certainly isn't terrible. And, yeah, not really sure. The Spire of Lazarus is definitely one of those staves that if you can find it and utilize it on level, it's very sexy. But it is obviously going to get outclassed by the shields and the weapon slot items later on in the game. And there are obviously other staves that you could find, like for instance Iron Jangbong, which could potentially be better than this staff in general. Or even some of the Nightmare version staffs like Chromatic Ire at level 35, which we'll be covering later. all in all, I mean, if I were to rate this staff, it's definitely a good low-level item, but it's not going to serve you past Nightmare difficulty. Once you get into Nightmare difficulty, you're going to be looking to replace it. As always, do appreciate you guys and gals watching my videos, even when we are covering a staff made out of maggots. And as always, keep watching.